Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
See, our scholar is remote today. So Christian, good morning. I think
Good
we've
morning.
got, I think we've got a quorum here. So why don't you go ahead and start it?
Okay. Let's see. You're ready for me to start now?
Yes, we're ready for you to start.
Okay. Let's see. David was a warrior. Solomon was a businessman. They were father and son. They were both kings of a united Israel and Judah. And beyond that, they had virtually nothing in common. Let me talk about David first. David, of course, the first scene we get of David in the Bible is 1 Samuel 17, and it's a warrior scene. David fighting the giant Goliath. After that, David joins the army of the king Saul. Saul had become king in 1022 BC, and this is not long after Saul had become king. David was a faithful warrior to Saul, at least at the beginning. David was a superb warrior. He was such a good warrior killer that the women of Israel sang a song. Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. It was not the #1 song on Saul's hit parade. David became more and more popular. He had a lot of charisma. Saul became jealous and fearful of David. David was well connected, became well connected with Saul's family. David will marry Saul's daughter, Michal, who loved him. I'm not sure that he reciprocated, but it was a way into the family, and perhaps more the marriage was perhaps more of a way into the royal family than most people realize. My theory on this is that this marriage, well, remember, Saul is the first king of Israel. We do not have a method of succession for the kings of Israel yet. We always assume that it's the son of the king becomes the next king, but that's not always the case in antiquity. It certainly was not in Egypt, where there the custom was matrilineal succession. That is, the king will be the person who marries the queen's daughter. So the line goes through the queen to the princess to the next, straight down, and whoever marries, it doesn't necessarily have to be the son. Well, it's not normally the son of the next king. Now, the queen doesn't rule, but it is her husband who does rule. And again, the succession goes through her. There's not yet, Saul being the first king, they don't have an established form of succession. My suggestion is that David marries Michal because he thinks she could, that marrying her might make him the next king if they go matrilineal succession. There are a couple of other things that make me think this. One in particular, Saul's oldest son, Jonathan, who is a featured character throughout the narrative, has never shows any ambition to become king. I think he doesn't have any ambition to do that because the line's not going to run through him. So in any case, David is married to Michal, but David's true love is Jonathan. And I'm going to read just a couple of texts about David's relationship with Jonathan. This is from 1 Samuel 18, when the beginning of 1 Samuel 18. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and David loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe he was wearing, and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. David went out and was sick. Well, I'll stop that one there. Looking at 1 Samuel 19:1, David spoke, Saul spoke with his son Jonathan and with all his servants about killing David. But Saul's son Jonathan took great delight in David. And then the last reference is in 2 Samuel chapter 1. And this is Saul and Jonathan will both be killed in war, the Battle of Mount Gilboa, which is in 1 Samuel 31. And David gives a eulogy, and after their deaths, I'd just like to read a couple of verses from that eulogy, starting at 2 Samuel 1:23 or 25. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. This is David talking. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. So David had those relationships within the royal family. Saul was increasingly jealous of David. Saul thought in terms of David. David was trying to get the throne, and I think David was. And so Saul made a couple of attempts on David's life. David got away both times. There's a third attempt is planned. Jonathan warns David to flee the royal family, the royal household. David leaves and goes into the wilderness, where he assembles a um, sort of vigilante is not the right word. Um, a revolutionary kind of band. David has that charisma. He can draw people to him. He can draw people to fight with him and for him. And so David and his wilderness band um, are mostly on the run from Saul's army. But what David will uh, do after some time, and Saul does have substantial army. David will make an alliance with uh, Achish, the king of Gath. There is a real irony here. Gath. Uh, Anybody remember who else lived in Gath?
Goliath.
Goliath lived in Gath. So David is taking up with his uh, former enemies, and he is this gives him protection from Saul. He is even given a city, a town, Ziklag, for his people to live in, and his army and their wives, and David's uh, growing number of wives. And Saul's there is war between, well, and the people of Gath are the Philistines. There is war between Gath and Israel, and and I might mention that Gath, modern day, in modern times, Gath is Gaza. So there is warfare. David is ready to take his forces and go fight with Achish and the Philistines against his own people. And maybe a little a point here that I might say a few things about the character of David. David is complicated. He is exceedingly ambitious. He is cunning. He is at times quite dishonest. He can be murderous. And that's a lot of what one will get from reading 1st and 2nd Samuel. If you read about David in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, however, David can do no wrong. He is perfect in every way, the great king. The bad story, like the Chronicles, totally leaves out the Bathsheba story that I think you're all familiar with. So, but anyway, he's ready to bring his band to fight with Achish and the Philistines against his own people, the Hebrews, and some of Achish's generals are distrustful of David. They know that he is not a Philistine. They know he's got a previous bad record with the Philistines and the whole Goliath episode. They prevail upon Achish for David and his group not to go with them. So David is kept home. David gets a lot of good breaks. That it turns out quite well that he does not go fight against his own people. He will need them later on. So he remains in Ziklag in Gath while the battle rages at Mount Gilboa. In the battle, the Saul's people are defeated. Jonathan is killed. Saul, when faced with certain death, commits suicide. And the reign, the next in line, the male line for Israel, for Saul, is a man named Ishbaal, who is a rather weak and ineffective ruler. Then David seizes this. Well, David gives that beautiful elegy that I read a couple of lines from a little while ago. David sees this as his opportunity. He takes possession of Judah, he and his forces. The army becomes loyal to him. David, further, the native people of Jerusalem and the Jebusites, David runs them out of Jerusalem and makes Jerusalem, really a southern part of Jerusalem, as the new capital. David then begins, he will quickly, well, Ishbaal is assassinated. Another thing about David, when people who are his foes die, he usually ends up giving a nice eulogy for them. He's good at not burning bridges, and so he does that with Ishbaal, and there's no David is now the ruler over all of United Kingdom of Israel and Judah, all of the previous 12 tribes. David now rules. And I'll give you the date for that. I'm really good for some reason at remembering dates. When I taught in college, I found that most of my students did not possess that ability. So I told them, here is one date I want you to remember. David becomes king of all Israel in 1000 BC. Of course, they wouldn't remember. They didn't remember it anyway. But so yeah, that's where our timeline is. David is, in his early years, he's quite effective. Again, David is he's a military man. His thinking is entirely about expanding territory, conquering new territory. During his reign, he will expand Israel's territory to the largest extent it will ever have. And as a ruler at that point, what he's not as good at is civil administration. After he becomes king, we have in 2 Samuel 9 through 20 and 1 Kings, 1 and 2, the story sometimes called the court history of David, sometimes called the throne succession narrative, written by an insider in David's court who knows a lot of, well, I know to say what he tells us is a lot of family problems for David. David's oldest son, Amnon, who would be next in line to be king, Amnon rapes his half-sister, Tamar. The full brother of Tamar, Absalom, then murders Amnon. So, I mean, who is the successor to be king. This is not only an act of vengeance for what Amnon did to Absalom's sister, but it also puts Absalom next in line to be king. David is heartbroken over the whole event. Absalom will leave the court, go into the wilderness, gather a band to fight a civil war against his father. And I think probably what most of you remember about that civil war is Absalom's death when he gets his nice big hair caught in a tree and then gets slashed to bits by David's chief bodyguard and assassin Joab. So the rest of the reign of David will be fraught with, and that rebellion is put down, Absalom's rebellion. There is another beginning rebellion started by well, two people, Shimei and the grandson, the crippled grandson of Jonathan, Mephibosheth, and that one is short-lived. The so David grows old. You get a sense of him in the latter chapters of 2 Samuel as being, well, heartbroken, and as great a warrior as he was in terms of his family, everything had gone very, very, very badly. We've had two men, Amnon and Absalom, two men in line to be two of David's sons in line to be king, who have now died. A third son, the next in line, is Adonijah, and if you read 1 Kings 1 and 2, we're still in the court history of David. David is on his deathbed. He does have a beautiful young woman with a really not so beautiful name who keeps him warm in his dying days. Oh, anybody remember her name? That's a good one. Abishag the Shunammite. I would suggest that none of you have granddaughters named Abishag, but in any case, when David, so the third son then jumps the gun and declares himself king before David is dead. And so David has sort of last dying wish has calls for him to be killed, and Joab makes sure that that is carried out. So it is the fourth. Adonijah is killed. This is the first three in line of succession are killed. The fourth, who is Solomon, the wife of Bathsheba, and you know that story. So Solomon becomes king. David ruled 40 years. That 40 years is a common number that is given throughout the Bible. So, but we can say, from what we know, Solomon becomes king in 960 BC, and as well, I think I'm going to just this is a good point to stop and before I begin to talk about Solomon. See any questions or thoughts you have about David or what we've talked about so far? I heard a peep.
Amy has a question. Hold on, Christian.
So one quick question. I arrived maybe like a few minutes late. We tried a little better to get here as timely as we could. But my question is, after I hear this, as you said, sort of sordid, complicated nature of David, ambitious, cunning, murder, but leader and all these things. In my some earlier church days had sort of had that teaching around, well, David is a man after God's heart, and this sort of devotional ask somebody to look towards. And again, some of the Psalms reflect, obviously, the range of repentance and things about David in relation to God. But anyway, my question is, what is your reflection or understanding of that sort of teaching around David being a man after God's heart?
That is, in fact, a verse in 1 Samuel. I forget. I think it's in chapter 18 even. Well, he is in, and again, it's like anything else. Different people have different viewpoints. If you want to read, and if you read First Chronicles, just you get a really different picture of David. All the bad stuff is left out, and you're also getting my interpretation. I've read this, I've read this text probably more times than anybody here, and I've read it in Hebrew several times. And that's the sense I get. At times, David can be absolutely ruthless, and you just think of the Bathsheba incident when David gets Bathsheba pregnant, and well, I won't tell the whole story, but basically sins is complicit in the murder of her husband, Uriah the Hittite. David does that whole plot, and then out of the goodness of his heart takes Bathsheba as his wife after he'd already gotten her pregnant. This, so that's, I mean, I think there is the good there. I'm now going to say something that may be, I don't know, this group doesn't get shocked that much. But I would agree with most Old Testament scholars that virtually all of the Psalms were written several hundred years later in the exilic and post-exilic periods. In other words, after 586, and were not written by David. The superscriptions to the, and of course, not all the Psalms are ascribed to David. There are Solomon has one, Asaph has several. Many are identified by tune names rather than. And when we get an attribution, what it will say is simply La David. In other words, well, and the La means two or four. So it's, in my thinking, those Psalms are being in honor of the memory of David. I doubt that David wrote. Okay, David played music. We know that he played music for Saul. There's one psalm that appears very personal, Psalm 51. That may be David's lament over his own life, but my sense is David did not write the Psalms. And I think I'm probably going to leave it at that point, though I'll certainly be glad to hear other disagreements or questions.
I have another question.
Okay.
If I can ask you another question?
Yes.
I was just interested to see that. I was just wondering what you can say about, it seemed that in David's court and in Saul's court, that was it just acceptable if you were strong and powerful, that it was just efficacious to just basically kill off problematic people? It's just interesting because these are the people that gave us the Ten Commandments, and this is very nothing personal. Got it. Just business, killing off the problematic people. I wonder what you can say about that.
It was much worse earlier, back in the days of the judges, or in Genesis and Exodus. You'd kill and much worse later too, during the period of the kings that followed. You'd often have, if you have a conflict, you kill the guy you have the conflict with and his whole family or his whole tribe as you can. I think of there are plenty of good stories that I'm thinking of. That story's too long to tell. Sorry, but yeah, that is acceptable. Not only acceptable, but particularly if somebody is going to be threatening to your rule, you would want to, or makes a claim. After the time of Solomon, the kingdom divides in two. Judah and Israel are separate kingdoms. Judah will have a continuous line of kings, all from the line of David. Not the case in Israel. Different kings, different dynasties, and what seemed like innumerable assassinations of kings, potential kings, and their whole families. So, yes, it was pretty well accepted. Makes me wonder if Vladimir Putin didn't read some of the Old Testament back there. I don't know. So, yeah, okay. Other questions or thoughts on David? So, okay,
Christian, Harry has a question.
If you presume that everything's is done to God's good purpose, then you'd have to have a person that was willing to do the things that were necessary to get that purpose done. Not another parallel thought would that be Samson. He wasn't a great guy. He did what God needed. When he was done, he still wasn't a great guy. David expanded the territory. That's what God needed at that time. Whatever purpose, whatever tactics were necessary to do that, whatever personality had to have been in David so he could make those kind of decisions. Then comes Solomon, and he seems to have been given the job of making a civilization. David got the territory. Solomon, I'm sure there was a lot of trouble there too, but generally speaking, civilized it, built the great temple.
you're stealing up the next part of my story here, but okay.
Since you're free, you talk about Solomon.
Oh,
You have a question?
uh, I don't know. I think my theology is a bit different from that, and I'm not I would say this too, that throughout the narratives of First and Second Samuel and First Kings 1 through 11, God is rarely mentioned. God is, I think if you look and see maybe God in control of overall events, but within the narratives themselves, God God seems, let's say, my theology, God lets humans work it out. And so again, that can just be a theological difference. Okay, other questions on David? Okay, let me talk a little bit about Solomon. As I said, they are as different as can be. Solomon, son of Bathsheba. Incidentally, when David did get Bathsheba pregnant, that child died in infancy. So this is a Solomon is from a later pregnancy of David and Bathsheba. Solomon is I said he was a businessman. If you read First Kings 1 through 11, the thing that gets talked about more and more, just throughout, is the increasing wealth of Solomon. He becomes fabulously wealthy. He has no interest in warfare, and this way is totally different from David. He is very happy with the boundaries of Israel as they are. He does keep them that way. He'd rather not make war. He'd rather make alliances, trade alliances. He develops a very close relationship with the king of Tyre, Lebanon, develops trade there in what he gets from there mainly is wood to build the temple. Solomon will build the temple. The been to Israel, it's pretty, but particularly around Jerusalem, it is very rocky, not much wood, olive wood, no big trees. So he develops that trade. He develops trade alliances that are far flung, even as far as Ethiopia. He uh, for those alliances to be how do you make an alliance with another nation in that time? Sign a treaty? No. What do? Marry the king's daughter. You marry the king's daughter and she's in your house. He's not going to want to make war on you. Solomon made many alliances, 700 wives and 300 concubines. And I could say practically all of these wives were political marriages. Some of them I'm sure Solomon never even saw, but they did live many of them lived in his palace and other palaces that were bought for him, that he bought for them. He built two great buildings, the temple, which would be the center of worship for the Hebrews for the next 400 years, and the palace. You go to Jerusalem, you can see there's a beautiful model, outdoor model of ancient Jerusalem showing the temple. And we in First Kings 6 and 7, you get a very elaborate description of the temple, and it was really beautifully adorned, lots of gold. Solomon acquired tremendous wealth. It was a magnificent palace that he built. He won something that will be a problem immediately after his death, is that Solomon used levies of forced labor from all of the tribes to do the work for him. He and particularly those of the northern tribes, really resented all of this money and labor being expended on a city that was in the southernmost part of of the United Kingdom of Israel and Judah. Solomon's uh, uh, trade, these peace alliances worked very well for developing trade, and some in the Mediterranean world at this time, Israel is as powerful as it's ever going to be. And so Solomon's, the one thing that he does that takes him out of favor with God is that all of these women, the 700 wives, come from other countries with other religions. They bring their entourage with them. They bring their religion with them, their gods with them. Solomon allows them to worship as they will. He doesn't make any efforts to have them convert them to Yahweh worship. And in fact, he allows them to build shrines to their own gods. And in 2 Kings 11, all this comes out and puts Solomon in disfavor with God. Nonetheless, Solomon dies peacefully, not in war, but war breaks out right not long after his death. His son Rehoboam is let's say that this is going to sound contradictory. He's a weak ruler, but a harsh ruler. He tries to rule with an iron fist, but uh, he's not able. He doesn't have the charisma to keep the country together. There is a rebellion against Rehoboam, led by a general from Solomon's army named Jeroboam. The kingdom will split in two, with Jeroboam controlling what will be called Israel, what was the 10, 12 tribes, Rehoboam governing the the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. And the kingdom will remain split from that point on. And just very briefly, from that point, in 722 BC, the northern kingdom, Israel, will fall to the empire of Assyria. And in 586 BC, the southern kingdom will fall to Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And what is, I guess, the saddest days of Israel's life, Nebuchadnezzar destroys the temple, destroys the palace, lays waste Jerusalem. Many people escape to Egypt, but the rest he takes, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians take into exile into Babylon, where they will remain in exile for 50 years. And so that's, and the temple is gone. It will be rebuilt by Herod during the lifetime of Jesus, only to be destroyed again by the Romans in 70 AD. So I'm going to stop there. I think let me ask for further questions or comments on Solomon or the other thoughts you.
There's a message in the chat that would be good for the people in the classroom to become aware of. But it has a URL with 80 characters of gibberish in it. So maybe it's just capturing
Okay.
the name of Joel Baden.
Okay. Okay. Joel Baden, professor at Yale Divinity, will give you a bit of detail of King David. He also has a second interview on 2 Samuel, if you were interested to dig more. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. One thing that I've heard for a long time was the saying of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was given as an upper limit to try to prevent this. I stubbed my toe, you've made me do it, I'm going to kill your whole family.
Yeah.
When was that attempt at controlling all these murderous temptations promulgated? given how you're saying both before and after times were even more murderous than what you focused on today.
Well, it's eye and an eye and tooth for a tooth is in the Torah. It was, as you indicated, Nelson. Let's see, the fancy term for it is Latin, the lex talionis, the law of revenge, and that is that you revenge someone only to the extent that you have been hurt yourself. Before that time, it was the custom, and really too much after that time as well. The custom was much. Just tell the story, for example, of the rape of Dinah in Genesis 34, when the 12 sons of Jacob, their sister is raped by, well, he wants to marry Dinah, this guy Shechem, but can't wait. He rapes her. Then his father asked for them to go ahead and marry, and for the Israelite tribe and his tribe, the Shechemite tribe, to be joined together as is this family, Dinah and Shechem. And so the brothers of Dinah say, yes, we can do this. We can join your tribe to ours, but we are circumcised men. And for us to do this, all you men must be circumcised. And so all of the men of Shechem's tribe are circumcised. And I loved what it says. This is in the King James. On the third day, when they were still sore, the 12 sons of Jacob came and killed the whole tribe. So eye for, this is before Moses and an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And then you remember, you go to the New Testament, and Jesus in Matthew 5 will say, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not, and I'm not going to remember the rest of it, do not resist one who is evil. If anyone hits you on the right cheek, or hits you on, the right cheek, turn to him the other also, which takes it. So yes, an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth was progress, but even though it wasn't always followed. Okay. Got time for one or two more questions or comments?
I wanted to ask you about the thinking that I don't understand, which is that the being taken to Babylon and being in exile for 40 years was somehow the fault of the Jewish people. I don't really understand that thinking. Have you heard that? And why would scholars think it was their fault somehow that they were?
Well, that's said a lot, a number of places, and I can't point you to specific texts that it is, but you get that by a number in post-exilic prophets, Ezekiel, Jeremiah in particular, who do blame the sin of the Hebrew people as the cause for God's allowing Babylonians to conquer them. And so, yes, it is there. And it's a generalized sin. And if you, in some ways, the entire Old Testament is a history of sin. You can start with Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and all of the great heroes of the Old Testament also seem to be great sinners as well. Some of them greater. Well, we've just given the example of David. So it is a sense among Ezekiel, Jeremiah, some of the other minor prophets, that it is this collective historical sinfulness of the people that led to the destruction of Jerusalem. And in that way, the Babylonians are an instrument of God. Now, the exile lasts 50 years, but after that 50 years is over, and the Babylonians are defeated by the Persians, the Persian king Cyrus allows the Jews to return to Jerusalem. There will be 4 separate returns over the next 50 years or so, but the temple will be rebuilt. Initially rebuilt, completed about 538 is when Cyrus lets them go free. 510 is when the new temple is completed. The second temple, there is the old men. I think this is it's in Ezra. The old men, and there weren't very many of them, who could remember the first temple, wept when they saw the second temple. And it doesn't say why they wept, whether it was tears. I think they probably wept because the second temple was these were poor slaves who would return to build the temple, not slaves to the Babylonians. They are not super wealth like Solomon. That second temple would, King Herod, 400 years later, would rebuild the temple, or remodel's not the right word. I don't know a right word. Not entirely rebuild, not entirely remodel, but make it
Quite a lot.
I'm sorry?
Expanded quite a lot.
Quite a lot on the basis of the instructions in 1 Kings 7. And it was to be a glorious temple. It was not, of course, built during Jesus' lifetime, completed in 62 AD, and then destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. And so we're out of time, and on
Christian, yeah.
Yes.
Christian, I want to make a comment, and that is that I think all of us are deeply grateful for the wisdom that you've shared with us. I mean, you have an amazing wealth of knowledge that's very profound, and it's just been a great inspiration to be able to hear this. So thank you for your willingness to share all this with us.
Oh, well, thank you very much, people. I'm really, you can give thanks to Duke. That's where all my education was. My PhD is in biblical studies from Duke University. It was so long ago that I think we had a course on Paul that was called recent literature, Uh, so anyway, thank you. Really, really appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you, Christian.
Let me close this with a little prayer. God, we give you thanks for all of our Hebrew ancestors who for all their efforts, their troubles, their sinfulness, their goodness, passed on this faith that became fulfilled in Jesus Christ and has come down now even unto us. In his name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for people online. Next Sunday, Melody is going to be our leader. So we're looking forward to that. So
Melody right there.
we're expanding our.
I will need everyone to come willing and ready to talk. I am not a Bible scholar.
We're going to be talking about the Samaritan woman, so that should be exciting.
Okay.
So see you all next week. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.